Welcome back to another episode of Hail Yes, a Michigan football and basketball podcast by the Detroit Free Press. I'm Andrew Burkle, of course, joined by our Michigan beat writer, Tony Garcia, who has been maybe the most busy man in all of media these last few days. It feels like weeks, feels like months, but it's been actually less than a week. And just to rewind here for a second for you guys, last Wednesday, when it all went down with Sherrone Moore, we had recorded a podcast, of course, right before that, talked basketball, talked a little bit of bowl game. We had to throw that entire thing in the trash because Wednesday was probably the craziest day of my day life in the media so far. I would venture to say it is probably similar for yours, Tony. Sherrone Moore fired. We find out via a tweet from first ESPN, and then we confirm it on our own from a statement from Michigan. They get right into it. They say Sherrone Moore was fired for an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. Not too long after that, we start hearing buzz that he may have been arrested. So we start tracking that down. Sure enough, as everyone knows by now, Sherrone was arrested on Wednesday afternoon, held in jail all of Thursday, and then charged and arraigned in court on 3 charges, 1 felony for home invasion, and then 2 misdemeanors, 1 for stalking and 1 for breaking and entering. So where do we go from here? That's the big question, right? Everyone's wondering what happens next, not just in Sherrone's case, but also for Michigan football. And that seems to be the question on everyone's mind, right, Tony, is just what happens next now that we've all had not that long, but even a beat to digest all of this craziness.
Yeah, I think it does feel like that's where we're starting to reach, because last week it was still too early to think about what's next. This was, this was an assault investigation. This was just trying to comprehend. And I think people are still in the mode of wrapping our minds around really what just happened these last 4 or 5 days. It was just Monday morning where we were meeting with Sherrone to preview the Citrus Bowl, business as usual. And as the timeline goes in court documents obtained by the Free earlier this week, the individual, the victim, had actually broken up with Sherrone Moore earlier on that day, Monday morning. Then, according to court documents, Moore continued to contact her Monday, continued to contact her Tuesday. And then by Wednesday, this person had evidently, according to documents, had enough and went back into the University of Michigan and told them and showed, quote, credible evidence that she and Sherrone had been in a relationship for 2 years at that point. Both parties, the victim and Moore, had been interviewed and investigated internally by the department back in October when rumors sort of reached a head, so to speak, and both denied having any sort of relationship. Their phones were searched, source told me, and nothing came of it. And so things sort of died down a little bit after that. But it was these last couple weeks where everything really picked back up. Michigan hired an investigative law firm, Jenner & Block, to look into the matter. But really, it was the victim coming forward and changing her story, and I don't even like to phrase it's changing her story, but telling the truth, that really is what made that Michigan's had nothing left to do but to fire Sherrone. It was a violation of his contract. It was a violation of university policy. And that's when everything really started that you've been talking about, right? Sherrone left the facility. He ended up ultimately going to the victim's house. He broke into it. And I think when we ask what's next, part of this is what's next with these charges, because I spoke to Sherrone Moore's attorney, Joseph Simon, the day after he was arraigned, and our investigative reporter and myself, who've been sort of looking into this, Dave Boucher. Dave got some court documents that showed that in the swear to, which is a meeting between the lawyers and the judge, just so everybody can get on the same page prior to the public arraignment. In those court documents, it said that the victim's attorney stated that Moore came at the victim with butter knives and a pair of scissors. The victim then, again, this is all according to court documents and the prosecution, more than when the victim called her attorney on the phone, that's when Moore allegedly turned the implements on himself and intimated that he was going to do self-harm, that he was going to kill himself, and that, quote, the blood was going to be on her hands. But if that first part is true and the knives or the scissors or what have you, the butter knives, were pointed at the victim, then generally speaking, by the letter of the law, that would be assault. But Moore was not charged with assault. That's why it was an assault investigation. So we were asking why Simon believes his client was not charged with assault. And he said in so many words that charges can be amended one way or the other, right? You can be charged with something early and then that can not hold, or vice versa, right? Like maybe something more can come of this investigation. It was unclear if there was enough evidence at that time to charge Moore with assault. And I'm not saying that he's going to be, but I think that's one of the major questions, because right now, as it is, it's already a horrendous situation. But the Free Press also, Dave Boucher spoke to some criminal defense attorneys at this time, and both of them say, based on the charges that were filed by the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office, they don't believe that it looks like Sherrone is going to go to jail. Now, could he for a short amount of time? It's possible, but he's a first-time offender and those sorts of things, and not to mention this high-profile case, they believe it'll probably just be a lengthy probation period. But if this ends up being an assault, that would make jail time far more likely. The investigation is still not completely done. Like, that's part of where I'm still at right now. Just what are these charges that ended up getting presented at the next month's hearing?
And not just assault, also first degree home invasion versus third degree, where the jail time bumps up to possible maximum 20 years under first degree home invasion, which I have talked to a lawyer just about this generically, not like on the record or anything, who told me that, first degree tends to be more of the charge when the victim is in the home, they're at the home, and then things can escalate pretty quickly from that standpoint, and that tends to be the barrier there. So yeah, ultimately, you mentioned Joe Simon was great. You got a hold of him. I think the prosecutor's office is ultimately going to be who was going to have to answer a lot of the questions about the difference between what was said in the swear to versus what ended up getting, because they didn't in the, like you were there, I was watching virtually. We watched the whole thing, and they never once mentioned that Sherrone threatened the victim. That was not said one time that, he threatened her. And then it also wasn't said that he pointed the knives, which was said. So it's like, how could that possibly have been left out unless a conscious decision was made to not mention that? Which I think that the prosecutor's office will not only be asked, but I think it will be eventually held to an answer on at some point, hopefully, because it seems like a big deal.
Yeah.
Right?
And the first assistant Washtenaw County prosecutor, Katie Razmersky, was the one in court. We reached out to her via the phone and did not have our phone calls returned. And again, Dave Boucher, who has been working this with me and really leading the charge, so I'm going to continue to mention his name. He was able to, while everybody else was following Simon, he was able to, I guess the phrase hunt her down is probably not a good phrase right now, but he was able to find her trying to sneak out a back door and get into her car and avoid the media throng that was waiting outside the courtroom. Because it's really like what you see on TV. There was a semicircle of 20, 25 reporters, cameras, all talking over each other. It was mayhem.
I couldn't believe the video I saw of Joe Simon. Did you see that video we had? We had a video we posted of Joe Simon, and we were like 7 rows back and was still like one of the better. I couldn't believe the amount of people surrounding him. It was crazy.
Yeah, no, it was a lot. And it's neither here nor there. I had to stand on a bench. Like there's like benches outside the courtroom, and I was standing on a bench, and I'm like videoing down on him. And so, I think it was just another angle of it as well. We had 3 of us all surrounding him and trying to speak with him. But Dave tried to reach Katie, and there was a sheriff escorting her to her car and sort of holding him back, like, nope, she's not taking questions right now. And so the prosecution's just been a little bit difficult to reach right now, I guess is the reason I say that. But one more point to what you said about first degree. The victim was in the house when Sherrone broke into it. According to court documents we obtained, again, the victim was packing to leave. The intention was this person was going to leave town. And as she's getting some of her belongings together and getting ready to go out, she hears a car pull up. She runs down the stairs. Again, this is all according to the prosecution and court documents. She runs down the stairs. And as she's approaching the door, that's when Sherrone grabs the door and opens it and barges in. I think they said she was like 6 feet away from the door, or like very close to being able to lock this door, but did not get there in time. And then she's backing up as the prosecution states. Sherrone is approaching her. And so these are the details. And it's also about what the prosecution is going to be able to prove. The reason they're going to be able to have no problem proving the rest of it, it seems, I shouldn't say no problem. The reason they're going to have a much stronger chance to prosecute the rest of this and the charges that were filed is because there's evidence to show all of it, right? Like, so the victim called her attorney on the phone as Sherrone is saying some of these things, and the attorney overhears Sherrone allegedly saying, "This is all your fault. I hate you. My blood is on your hands. I'm gonna do things to myself," all that sort of stuff. So really, I mean, this would be unbelievable to hear this about any coach in America, this story. But the fact is happening right here in Ann Arbor with a coach who I've worked with for 4 years in a department I've been around for some time, is really, frankly, just startling. And now I guess that leads into what's next, which is the investigation into the athletic department at large. I mean, the Jenner and Block is continuing to investigate who knew what and when, how these number of incidents have been allowed to happen or not allowed to happen, how they have all seemingly stacked up against one another in recent years. And just what I think about is the messy hierarchy situation. You've got an athletic director who's trying to hire a football coach, but that athletic director is under investigation. And who does the athletic director report to? The president. But Michigan has an interim president. So there is no level of stability at any of these three key positions at the university. The only thing that goes unchanged is the Board of Regents, whom the president reports to. I mean, they're obviously still in charge. And I mean, and Jordan Acker one of the regents was releasing a public statement yesterday, or earlier this week, I should say. I don't know when this will hit the feed, just stating that there needs to be full transparency and the findings of this investigation need to be made public and on and on. It's just an unbelievable situation. But I've been told that the findings of this investigation, Warde Manuel's future is tied to them. I was told that it's fair to say that. And so if there is no cover up or nothing more, or it doesn't appear that Warde was negligent in his handling of this or the other scandals, but he did things by the book, it sounds like he's going to stick around. But if there is evidence that at any of these twists or turns, there was any foul play or more knowledge of the situation than was let on, that could be a very entirely different story for the future of Warde Manuel.
Yeah, it's interesting because as Thursday went on and we waited to hear from Sherrone's camp and we waited to hear what was going on, they of course are buttoning down and less is coming out. And the story kind of became about not just Michigan athletics and, for lack of a better word, another scandal, but also Warde Manuel, right? It started to kind of dominate the conversation. I think the reason he is staying on is because of that power vacuum. I don't know how you would describe it exactly, of the interesting power dynamics where the board of trustees or the board has their own voice, the Board of Regents. The president has a voice, but it's also an interim president. And then you have donors. It's 2025 in college football. Do not forget that, who, want to see that their Bryce Underwood contract is going to pay off, right? And they want us, hey, if you want money for this, you better listen to me about this. Just look what happened to Michigan State. Then you have Warde, who is still sitting in the athletic director's seat and is going to end up making this hire, which, by the way, we should mention, we're going to be talking about that on the other half. We want to get all the Sherrone stuff out of the way. We're going to talk all about the coaching candidates on the other side here. So stick around for that. But all of that has left it kind of in just such a wishy-washy place where I think that Warde is almost certainly the most plugged in and powerful voice in that room now regarding just football, right? Who would they turn to make this hire if Warde Manuel was not in that building or in that room and in those discussions? I don't know where they would even begin to start, right? So I think that's why he is not just hasn't been fired. He's an essential part of those conversations right now. And it feels like, just reading between the lines, that some of the groundwork has been laid for at least wiggle room with this investigation and expanding, and Warde's future is tied up into it. But it feels like that they're giving themselves some wiggle room that, like, hey, once we get this situation figured out, if we decide to move in the other direction from Warde, they're kind of laying the groundwork a little bit now just to say, hey, if something else comes up, we've now kind of said this so that they can still go forward with this coaching search as is now. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think nobody is trying to rule anything out, right? Because of just how messy everything's been.
And it can be perceived like that, right? It can be perceived like you're kind of laying the groundwork when you're saying when nothing's being ruled out, right? Like there's a difference between saying Warde is our athletic director, he's here to stay, and hey, we're not ruling anything out.
No, that's true. But also I was told by an individual with a lot of knowledge of the situation that Warde Manuel is the athletic director right now. And I was told he was not on the hot seat, quote, in any imminent way. That was last Thursday. This is now Monday. So things have, that was sort of the day you were alluding to. And as things really ramped up, but the Board of Regents, I was told the Board of Regents met with Warde Manuel on that day. And that's when there were some serious discussions about everything that was going on and what the next steps were, meaning this investigation that was going to continue. So I could see how people would perceive it that way, that they're trying to set up like a framework, so to speak, of, hey, if we see any of these things, this is what's going to happen. Now, it's not exactly certain what the level of proof or what wouldn't be needed in order to make this decision. But I guess let's go here. Some people are saying, why does anything more need to happen? I mean, look at just everything. It's like there's already reason to want to make a move here. I think it might, just one theory is perhaps like a buyout situation, right? If you're able to like Michigan is firing Sherrone with cause, so they won't have to pay the rest of his contract. They might be looking at the same for Warde, right? You don't want to fire someone without cause, because one of the main jobs of an athletic director is to win. And I am not defending Warde Manuel here. I am saying he has done the job in that respect in finding ways to win by hook or by crook, right? Michigan basketball is number one in the nation. Michigan hockey is number one in the nation. Michigan women's basketball is top 5 in the nation. Michigan football won a national championship 2 years ago. They had 3 straight trips to the college football playoff. Field hockey's been largely good. Gymnastics just won a national championship. Softball is in the NCAA tournament every year. It was just 5 years ago or less that Michigan baseball was in a national championship game, right? There has been a lot of winning. Michigan in the last 5 years has more than twice as many Big Ten championships as any other team in the league across the department. So when you say, and Warde has been very willing to take a lot of these bullets and just sit back and take them. And I mean, I've spoken to him about this before. He's like, I could go forward and try to defend this and try to defend that. He's like, but that's just not his MO. That's not his character. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's a fact. That's how he handles these things. And so when you have someone who's willing to be the fall guy at points, someone who that I've been told is good with the donors, maybe this is a tipping point, right? But historically has been good with the donors, is good at a lot of the front-facing things or the back-facing things, I guess, if you want to call it, with not front-facing with the media, but front-facing with the people who matter around the department and who help make that thing run. He has good relationships with a lot of people. That's why it's not just as easy as like, look, this is another scandal. We've had 2 NCAA investigations. We've had to fire a hockey coach after a lengthy report. We've had to fire a basketball coach after a historic collapse, after he assaulted another coach at another school, after he got into an altercation with one of his own staffers. We've had FBI investigations into offensive coordinators for computer crimes in Schembechler Hall. We've had to fire Michigan football coaches for DUI. I mean, just you name it. It's happened in the last 5 years here, just about. And so this could be a tipping point.
Yeah. And I mean, you have the thing where he was, you used the term earlier, he was front facing when Xavier Simpson got pulled over, when he was driving his Warde Manuel's wife's car. Like there's been a lot of situations where Warde Manuel's name continues to come up. And I don't know. I think that Sean Windsor, our columnist here, kind of wrote about it on Thursday going into Friday, just about, is it Warde's fault that Sherrone decided to allegedly have a relationship with a member of his staff? Like, no, that's not Warde's fault. Neither is, like the FBI investigation into Matt Weiss per se, right? Like those things are not his fault, but it's just like, almost like at what point do you just have to turn the page to a certain degree? It just feels like that's kind of the momentum, especially when you have people like, love him or hate him, but he obviously helped get Bryce Underwood to Michigan, like Dave Portnoy saying Warde Manuel's out. And like, there's just like, it seems like a rising tide, if you will, of this whole thing. But real quick, we want to get to the coaching candidates and take a break here. But what was your perception of how this was talked about nationally? I mean, you follow all these accounts, you're plugged into college football, you're plugged into that whole perception. You were on CNN. You're talking about it on CNN. You're talking about it on Dan Patrick's show. What was your perception of how this was, like, how people felt about this nationally and just the general vibe around this whole thing?
I mean, I think people were just sort of stunned, right? Like, so these people don't know a lot of these characters personally, right? And I don't mean like in a personal relationship, but just have met them, spoken to them every week in Schembechler Hall for weeks on end, or have all these people they know in and around the department. And so I think it's not a pretty word, but it felt almost like a spectacle. Like, look at, like, just like, I mean, you know how news media will circle, like, I mean, when they smell blood in the water, right? Like, and this has all the elements, right? A major brand, a big time firing, a salacious story, jail, potential assault, an intimate relationship, an investigation into the athletic department, right? All the elements are there to make this just a very fascinating story from the national media perspective. And that was really the vibe I got. People, as I would just sort of say what we were uncovering, people were like just shaking their head, like how is this not a movie? And I mean, I suspect one day it will be a documentary.
Certainly feels that way. No, I think that's a great way of saying it. I mean, even you look at the people who were all over this story nationally, it wasn't just your CNNs or NBCs. It was New York Post was writing like 100 articles about this whole thing. And you know, not like you should be checking them for journalism standards, right? But they were all over this, and TMZ was writing about it, right? So like it had a spectacle element to it that just felt like something that I hadn't seen personally. Not that it hasn't happened, but it was certainly the biggest national thing that I've been a part of, where just like everybody in your life is talking about this thing, and it has a sports gossip element to it as well.
Yeah, give me 30 seconds, because I hadn't written about this yet because I didn't quite finish it, but this feels like a good spot for it. So there have been some rumors about Sherrone Moore's messaging females on the website called OnlyFans. And the New York Post, that was one of the things they were referencing a lot. There were references about tickets and exchanges and meetings at the national championship. I messaged with the woman involved in this. And yes, I did get clearance by my fiance to send a direct message to an OnlyFans model. But I was told by her, "Hi, Tony, this story is far from the truth. That never happened. I never said that," in reference to if Sherrone offered to provide her tickets to the national championship game. And she said, and I asked her what the truth was. She said there were interactions between them, but she never met with him in person, even when she went to games. She characterized the interactions as friendly. She did say he was trying to see her, to get to know her when he was on recruiting trips to Houston. Houston is also the site of the national championship game, so he could have been trying to message her then. And he did send her a direct message as soon as he got out of jail. She would not disclose the contents of that message to me. So some of these things are true. Others are not. It's just be very careful with the media you're taking in and trusting, because there's gossip. There's things spreading like wildfire around this. It's why we had not been able to properly vet this for the past couple of months. Had we heard rumor? Sure. But rumor is not enough to report. And so just because other people have lower, and this is not a degradation of them, just different institutions have different level of standard for what they will and won't report. I think one thing we take pride in at the Free Press is our standard of evidence that we require is extremely high. And that's why we can't always get to things quickly, because all T's need to be crossed, all I's need to be dotted. We need to make sure that we won't be sued, that we're not libelous, that everything we say, we have enough proof to back up, or that we have cross-reference this with multiple people who have knowledge of the situation. And people weren't, and the victim and Sherrone were denying it up until this week, when, again, according to a court document we obtained, Sherrone did ultimately admit that they were in a relationship. So people's stories change. I know that was a lot there. I just wanted to put a bow on that.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because I know we have to get to the second part of this. We mentioned it 3 times, but the whole like blue wall coverage of this, and like, oh, if so-and-so knew about this for so long, why didn't they dig into it? Why didn't they report it? Like, you can just knowing about something doesn't mean you can automatically report it, or you could put your entire life's work into reporting that story, and it may not have come out, right? Like, we had conversations about like, hey, let's just keep digging on this. Let's keep digging on this. Like, you and I personally had those conversations, right? And like, we just couldn't, there's standards and all that stuff you referenced, right? So it wasn't like we weren't doing every single thing we could to break that story. Trust me, like, we wanted to break that story, right? That was not in question. And so I was getting a little irritated just reading all that stuff, as if like we didn't want to break that story. Like, that would have been amazing. We would have loved to do that. We broke other stuff in the following days, but like, trust us, like that we were anything we did we were following up on a lot.
There is no
right?
shield. I mean, we're not just looking to air out, like, it's not like we're trying to slander anybody, but we're also certainly not trying to protect anybody. We're trying to find the facts, report the truth, and report what's relevant. And Michigan, I will say this, Michigan is notoriously buttoned up, locked down. They keep us at an arm's length, particularly the football program, for a reason. And it's reasons like this. And so why did nobody report, like, why had everybody heard rumor, but nobody had reported, no credible media outlet had reported this is happening factually? Because nobody could prove it. That's why Michigan fired this Sherrone on Wednesday, because on Wednesday is when one of the people involved came out and admitted it. It was not, nobody had walked in on that. I've spoken to two people, to multiple former staffers in this past week. And essentially people sort of thought they knew, but nobody had like walked in on anything, right?
All right, quick break. We'll talk to you guys in just a second. All right, welcome back, Tony. I mean, there's so much more, and maybe we'll come back later in this week because this is the story that's going to keep on giving here, and there's a lot more layers we haven't even had the chance to discuss. But let's talk some coaching candidates. So far, the two biggest names I would say that have been in connection to Michigan were Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, the 35-year-old coach who brought them to the college football playoff last year. They were 8-4 this year, I believe. And then Kalen DeBoer, of course, who Michigan fans remember from the 2023 National Championship at Washington, now at Alabama. Both have in different ways sort of kind of said no. DeBoer's statement seemed to be a lot more definitive. Basically said he's happy at Alabama. He hasn't talked to anyone, doesn't want to talk to anyone. Now he's about to play in the college football playoff this coming Friday against Oklahoma. So him ruling out that distraction is a lot more important. Dillingham, the interesting element of his thing was like reading what he said felt a little different than watching it. When you read what he said, it was like, oh yeah, he's staying at Arizona State. And you watch it and you're like, that wasn't as definitive as it reads, right? It was kind of a little bit more, I mean, it's not a very nice word, but kind of felt a little like squirmy and like, I'm a little uncomfortable watching him say it, right? Maybe that's just because he doesn't like talking about this at all. But I would say that one is not entirely closed just based on reading between the lines there. But what are you hearing? Obviously, Jedd Fisch is another name, the current Washington coach, but any buzz you're hearing as far as what direction this might be heading?
Yeah, I mean, I was asking somebody when the Dillingham stuff was picking up, and they were saying it's still just rumors right now. I mean, not that it's not true, but it's not advanced enough to say anything. I do believe that Michigan has reached out to them. I don't have that for certain, but that's my understanding reading between the lines. And you don't cry about and I'm not shaming anyone for crying, but you don't get emotional and cry about something like that if you're just staying, if you're not considering it at all. At least that's how I see it. And so I think Dillingham would still be in the mix here. And DeBoer, you mentioned it. I mean, Alabama's playing Oklahoma next weekend, right? Like there's no time for distractions. They will not put up with that in Tuscaloosa. And so he had to put out some sort of statement. It did seem very definitive. He said, I have not spoken and have no interest in speaking with anyone else about any other job. I am fully committed to this program and look forward to continuing as the head football coach at the University of Alabama. Now, people are saying that he's just using this Michigan thing as leverage to make more money and sign a new contract. I saw some national reports that DeBoer and Alabama brass are in conversation for an extension or a raise of some sorts. I'm not down there. I don't have contacts down there. I could not prove that one way or the other, but maybe that's true. Or maybe he's just saying what people want to hear. I mean, you can't if this saga has not taught us anything, has taught us nothing, it is that you can't just take people at their word, right? You really have to dig into things, and you have to, as much as you'd like to. And so DeBoer does feel like a real long shot at this point, but I mean, I wouldn't say it's 0% until he inks a new contract or Michigan signs someone else. It's not zero. I mean, he had his rise at Indiana, so he's got Big Ten ties. He was an OC at Eastern Michigan, so he's familiar with Southeastern Michigan. His fit doesn't seem to be perfect at Bama. That's what everybody around that program says, and so there's just reasons to believe it. But Jedd Fisch, in terms of timeline, he would be the simplest candidate right now, just because Washington season is done. Washington just defeated Boise State in a bowl game. I think it was like the LA Bowl yesterday or Sunday, I should say, 38-10. So Washington won 9 games this year. They had 9-4. Michigan very well might finish 9-4, right? And no noteworthy wins really on either side. I mean, Washington, did they beat Illinois? Maybe they lost to Illinois. I know they beat. Yeah, it's all getting muddy. I'm not going to try to do this in live time and recall off the top of my head. While you're talking. But I mean, Michigan did beat Washington. But if you're both 9-4, and Washington beat Michigan last year when they were in Seattle, so I mean, Jedd Fisch is 1-1 against Michigan in his time at Washington. You could do worse than a Jedd Fisch. He was around in the early Harbaugh days, 15, 16. But there's also the argument to be made that you just want a clean break from everybody who was affiliated with the past regime that had multiple NCAA sanctions, although all those started after the early days, right? That started in like 2020 and ran through 2023. So Fisch was not in any way, shape, or form related to those. But he was still on staff under Harbaugh, and Harbaugh has 14 years worth of show causes. So you could understand why someone doesn't want to tap back into those waters. And the last name that I think you were going to bring up, and I have not heard a ton about this name, but it's worth reporting. There was a report from Cleveland.com that Tommy Rees, the former quarterback at Notre Dame, who was an offensive coordinator under Saban at Alabama when Michigan beat them in the Rose Bowl in 23. Evidently, there's some interest there or some contact there. I haven't heard more about that, but it feels like things are just sort of percolating under the water, and Michigan's getting their search firm together, and they want to be quick, but not fast, right? Like they need to operate with some urgency, but not rush through this.
Yeah, they cannot. The optics are important here. They cannot just hire another coach without doing full due diligence with everything that just happened with the last two head coaches as far as how they departed and the show cause penalties. Obviously, Harbaugh's was much cleaner than Sherrone's, but I think they're going to be under some pressure to really have this button down, for lack of a better word. Just touching on DeBoer real quick. The thing that made his statement stick out a little bit more to me is that Alabama is one of a few jobs in the country that you could at least argue, and I would say is probably a better job than Michigan. Outside, it's Alabama, maybe Ohio State, depending on how you're feeling. Georgia, right? Georgia's better. And then the list gets very debatable, right? But Alabama is one of those jobs. So him saying hey, I want to stay. I mean, the only reason people would even make that connection, no one would be hey, let's get Nick Saban up at Ann Arbor, when he was in his heyday, right? That wasn't going to happen because why would he leave Alabama for Michigan? But the unnatural fit, maybe he doesn't like it that much. He made it very clear his family loves it down in Tuscaloosa. At least that's what he said. So that combination of the statement plus situation made it seem a little bit more definitive to me. But where Michigan goes from here, I mean, there could easily be some name that we're not thinking of, right? That's how these things work. So-and-so knows so-and-so. That person is hired by a search firm that knows Warde. Next thing you know, he's the clear favorite, right? So the timing certainly is not great. I don't think we've actually even discussed that, being that this was probably the craziest coaching carousel in recent memory. You had Penn State striking out. I mean, Penn State's the best job on almost any coaching carousel for the last decade. And yet they somehow found themselves playing second fiddle to LSU and Florida as they were going through the whole Lane Kiffin situation. They ended up hiring Matt Campbell, who certainly would have been a name that Michigan would have looked at. So it's an awkward time to have to hire a head coach here, because so many coaches either A, just re-signed because they were rumored elsewhere, or B, just moved to a new team, or C, have said they're abundantly made it abundantly clear they're not leaving. So it's just there's no natural list of candidates like there might be for this job if it happened the day after the season.
That's exactly right. Yeah, no, second time in 23 months now that Michigan is hiring a coach or looking to hire a coach after National Signing Day, after the carousel has almost come to a complete stop. I mean, this is going to reopen the carousel a little bit here, but just not good timing, not good optics. You've had a couple of incoming freshmen who already get granted release from their national letter of intent. Depending on who comes in, that could also change who goes out as far as players. As far as coaching staff, it seems like no matter who comes in, it's going to be a largely new coaching staff is what it seems like right now. Maybe you keep a few pieces here and there, but guys like to bring in their own guys generally, or people they have connection to. And that's one of the things you sort of feel for all the just the ripple effect of how this affects, never mind Sherrone Moore's family, who you feel awful for, or this victim in this case, although I don't even want to go there. It does take two to tango, but still, if your house is broken into and all these things are happening, you're going to feel, any human would feel bad for that person. Almost you feel bad for, to a certain extent, for Sherrone. Not that he didn't bring it on himself, but I've been told that the pressure of this job was just too much for him. It was just, and then all the transgressions that he's doing behind closed doors, things just started to bubble up. And I think he wasn't ready. I think he wasn't ready for any of it. That seems pretty clear now. And then now all these coaches on this staff who very likely are going to need to look for new jobs. Their families are going to be uprooted. It's just the messiest situation I've ever been around, frankly. And just because you feel bad for someone doesn't mean it's not their fault. Doesn't mean they shouldn't be punished. It's just they're still a human, and it's too bad in a lot of respects. Just the craziest week of my career last week, without question. And we were together in Lansing and covering homicides and arrests and hoarder. I mean, you name it. It was going on up there, but nothing like this.
No doubt. You touched on Sherrone and just like part of your human, brain that feels bad for him. It was like seeing him in the jumpsuit in those videos. And like, that's when it really struck like, okay, this is, and you mentioned it, like a movie, like that felt like the fall of the tragedy, right? Like that was the final chapter in the tragedy, fast riser, all happens so fast. Next thing you know, it all falls apart equally as fast. And obviously from what we know, a lot of it was his own doing, but like you said, it's human nature. So, all right, man, we'll come back later. And, obviously if Michigan hires anybody, we'll do a breaking episode. We'll have all the coverage on thefreep.com. Thank you to our sports editor, Ryan Ford, who worked, again, coming off of Thanksgiving week, which was crazy. He worked some more ungodly hours to make it all happen here. Thank you to Tony, who just boots on the ground, man, him and Dave Boucher. Maybe we'll get Dave on the podcast here to kind of talk about all this too. That'd be fun to hear you guys just kind of go back and forth and all that stuff. So that'd be something to keep an eye out for. And thank you to the editor of the podcast, Robin Chan, who helped us edit a breaking news episode you guys probably saw on the feed at like 2 and 3 in the morning when sure, what do you need? He just did it. So that was awesome too. And thank you last but not least to our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, who helps lead our coverage this week. So with that, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for hanging with us here. And enjoy the rest of your week.